Faith has been used as medicine for thousands of years by countless people in virtually every society on Earth. Reports of restoring hearing, vision, health, and even the resurrection of the dead spurs the growth of religion even in the modern age.
In recent years, the phenomena of faith healing has been examined by numerous studies with mixed results. So are the adherents of these charismatic religions really being healed, or is it just psychosomatic? That's what we set out to uncover in this episode of
Is That For Real?
Perfect.
So, there's a little bit of background for you. But is faith healing for real? I mean, can people really pray and be healed? Can someone smack you on the head and heal you like some of those clips we just saw? Or is it just trickery, showmanship, and the placebo effect? What do you think, Deasis? Do you believe in faith healing?
I kind of do. I think some of it is baloney, and I think some of it's for real. I don't know about the ones where like the preachers are slapping the shit out of their damn members with the coat, but it's amusing.
My favorite one was the one you showed me. It was Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat.
Street Fighter.
And it would show like the score counts and as they would hit each other.
Tiger.
Yeah, the bonuses and all that. Yeah, you had all the sound effects from. Yeah, it was great. Fantastic. Yeah. What's interesting about faith healing is the people who are proponents, they say, look, all you have to do is look in the Bible because it's got healing all over it, especially in the New Testament with Jesus, the apostles, the laying on of hands, all that stuff. And they say this is a real thing.
Jesus, the original faith healer.
Yeah, but even before Jesus in the Bible, there are people who get healed. But of course, Jesus was like, he was the serious healer. You know,
he was the Mac Daddy of the healers.
The Mac Daddy of the healers. I think 19 recorded miracles, I think it was. A lot, right? And a lot of that included healing people, raising the dead, stuff like that. People today still claim they can raise the dead. There was a story in South Africa of someone who supposedly died, was raised through prayer, went to see the guy who killed him in prison.
I can't believe you did this to me.
And the guy,
what the hell were you thinking?
The prisoner who thought he had killed the guy, or did kill the guy, depending on whose story you believe, he was saved and changed and turned his life around and all that. And I laugh and laugh and laugh at those stories, but this was recorded by a PhD from Harvard. And her professor,
that's the crazy part.
Professor Brown, that she recorded. And she even says straight up, look, I'm not saying that this person was actually resurrected. What I'm trying to say is this person thought they were.
So it's pretty interesting.
And that their injuries did get better much more quickly than under ordinary circumstances. And of course, the skeptics are like, a doctor made a mistake. Thought a guy who was knocked out was dead. Put him in the box in the morgue.
I think that doctor was in training.
Must have been a charity hospital. Right? You get like the student doctor. Oh, yeah, he's definitely dead.
I think he's totally dead, dude. But hey, listen, can we grab lunch?
Like Princess Bride, he's mostly dead.
He's mostly dead.
If he's totally dead, there's only one thing you can do. Go through his pockets and look for loose change.
That was a good movie.
That was a great movie. Love that movie. But what do people believe? Let's roll a segment because the number of Americans that believe in this stuff astounded me. So let's play this segment with those numbers and then we'll talk about it. According to a Barna Group survey, the majority of American adults, 66%, believe people can be physically healed supernaturally by God, with 33% strongly agreeing and 33% somewhat agreeing that it is possible to be physically healed. The remaining one-third, 34%, are skeptical, comprised of 19% who strongly disagree and 15% who somewhat disagree. Age impacts how likely a person is to believe in faith healing as well, with millennials more likely to be skeptical. 1/4, 25%, strongly disagree. 21% of Gen Xers strongly disagree, and 14% of baby boomers strongly disagree. Education level also impacts likelihood of belief in supernatural healing. A little more than 1/4 of those with a college degree believe people can be supernaturally healed by God, 27%, compared with a little more than 1/3, 37%, among those who have a high school education or less. The more education one receives, the less likely they are to believe in supernatural healing. Almost 9 in 10 evangelicals, 87%, strongly agree that faith healing is possible.
I gotta admit, I'm not completely surprised that millennials believe less and less. I mean, in the world of Google, it's like we've talked about in a lot of other episodes, they can just shoot shit down, in 5 seconds as far as beliefs go. And I think that millennials are deviating away from a lot of traditional beliefs, religion, et cetera, but what I have noticed, and this is just my personal observations, I'm not a scientist, I haven't done any tests or surveys, but it does seem like millennials have gotten a lot more into the spirituality, like the Eastern stuff.
Right.
That stuff. It seems like that's kind of a growing trend with millennials.
That's been my experience, again, not scientific poll related experience, but certainly been my experience that millennials are less likely to be the traditional religions and more likely to lean Eastern.
Yeah.
That's true. And the nuns are the fastest growing religion in the United States. Nuns, N-O-N-E, not like Catholic nun. People who don't claim any specific religion.
Wait a minute, nuns.
but that doesn't mean that they're not spiritual. It means that they just don't associate themselves with any major religious institutions. So
that is definitely becoming more and more common.
Yeah. What's interesting about that to me is that Eastern religion is very big into what they call spiritual healing, which is like faith healing, but it's different because they don't think like God is curing you or whatever. They think the energies that you possess within you already are able to heal you. So they still have a very strong, what I would call faith healing belief, even though it's not the same as the way Christian evangelicals and what they call the charismatic Christians believe. Right. Pentecostals being the biggest one. And Pentecostal is kind of an umbrella term for this charismatic group, but they're the second. I did not know this. They're the second.
Those are the snake handlers, by the way. For those watching.
They're the second largest Christian group in the world. 500 million adherents, most of them in other countries, but there's a lot here too in the United States.
I know, and that's the thing that amazed me too. But to be fair, and we were talking about this, before the show, when you're over in these third world countries, you don't have a doctor. Yeah. So what do? The only thing you can do, you go to a faith healer and you hope like hell, literally hope like hell that it'll work out. And what's
really interesting about that, I'm glad you brought up the doctors, is that doctors believe more than even the normal general population. 74% of doctors believe that miracles have occurred in the past. 73% believe they still occur today. 55% said that they have seen treatment results in their patients that they would consider miraculous. And I have a personal story about that. I knew a lady back when I lived in Texas, in the Dallas area, and I'd known her for about a year, and she had a little boy who, at the time that I knew her, was probably about 7 years old, but I'm not sure how old he was when this happened because she didn't tell me. He got some disease, and forgive me, I don't remember what it was, that made him unable to walk. And he had to routinely go to treatments at a hospital, but he just wasn't getting better. And the doctor told her, look, you just got to understand that your son's probably never going to walk again. Right. But she was super evangelical. I don't know if she was Pentecostal, but very much part of a charismatic Christian group. Right. And she went home, she said, starting from Friday night all the way through Sunday night. She said she prayed, never left her bedroom except for absolute necessity. prayed for her son to be healed. Monday, she, packs up the wheelchair because he can't walk, so he's in a wheelchair. Goes to the hospital, puts him in the wheelchair, and is wheeling him in like she always did for the treatment. The little boy sees the doctor who he's got a personal relationship with. He really loves the doctor. He's been seeing this guy for a long time. The doctor's apparently a really nice guy.
Right.
The boy gets up out of the wheelchair and runs to the doctor. The doctor is, of course, very surprised. But when he talks to the mother about it, he says, we have a file for what we call miracle cures here at the hospital. It's like, because sometimes this stuff just happens, that people just magically get cured. Now, the skeptics say that that's known as spontaneous reversal, and it does happen. It's very rare, but it does happen that someone who has a very serious illness, their body, for whatever reason, if they just spontaneously get better for one reason or another, skeptics would say that just happens sometimes. It's a freak, rare thing. And believers say, well, yeah, it happens because we prayed for it to happen. We believe. But then it also happens to people who aren't even religious. So how do you explain that it being a rare thing? So, being a skeptic, I have a hard time believing any of it. But after all the research we've done on the placebo effect, I do admit that there's a lot of things and potential to the human body that we do not yet understand. That mind-body connection, that all of these tests, and there are tons of studies that show that the placebo effect is real. It has a very real impact on people. People do get better when they take a placebo sometimes. Yeah. And the only place that healing can be coming out of is within themselves. So what if this belief system in faith healing, whatever, is just like kickstarting the placebo effect?
I wonder about it myself. And I know my mom is a non-denominational Christian, but she is very big in the faith and all that. And she is a believer of faith healing. Mm-hmm. She even claims that she knows a couple of people who have been healed from cancer, and she believes that the only explanation is faith healing, God. They would come, they came, and the priest would come, they'd pray over them, and then they would get better. Then the cancer was in remission, or the cancer was gone. And
right.
I know the skeptics out there are probably laughing their asses off. But, hey, and fine, so be it, because I'm kind of in the middle on this one too. It's like, well, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But, yeah, she's told me some stories about how people have, I had this kind of cancer, and, my priest and all that, they prayed over me all night, same thing, praying and praising the Lord, and, whatever they do.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
smack them on the head.
Yeah. Hell, I'd be better too if you did that. Hey, I feel good. I feel good. No, please don't hit me again.
Now, there's a lot of evidence for and against the idea of faith healing. We'll go through the 4 first because tons of studies have been done on this stuff.
Right.
In one National Institute of Health funded study, individuals who pray daily were shown to be 40% less likely to have high blood pressure than those without a regular prayer practice.
I totally believe that. That one I believe.
Yeah, and that's more effect. Believable to me because I've read that prayer is very much akin to spiritual meditation in terms of it lowers the heart rate. It lowers the stress level.
It does. It gives you a sense of peace.
Yeah, and stress is the biggest cause of major disease. What happens when you don't have
peace or you have anxiety? Your blood pressure goes up.
That's right.
You can freak out walking into a doctor's office and your blood pressure jumps because you are freaking yourself out. You're psyching yourself out.
Most of these things I chalk up to placebo effect, which I can't say just the placebo effect because the placebo effect is pretty damn amazing.
It is.
What happens.
It is.
And I think that warrants further research. If anything we've covered in the show warrants further research, the placebo effect needs to be understood, and we need to know how to kickstart that. So when you go to the doctor, he can somehow convince you you're going to get better so that you will. I mean, just really.
All right,
seriously.
scientist. You hear it. All right.
That's right. Get on it.
Us. But make it happen.
We will talk about that a little bit more as we get going. Here's another one. Research at Dartmouth Medical School found that patients with strong religious beliefs who underwent elective heart surgery were 3 times more likely to recover than those who were less religious. 3 times more likely to recover. That is not an insignificant finding. That's huge. People who believed were 3 times more likely to get better. Here's another one. A 2011 study of inner-city youth with asthma by researchers at the University of Cincinnati indicates that those who practice prayer and meditation experience fewer and less severe symptoms than those who had not. Now, that definitely sounds like placebo effect to me.
Yeah.
Very much so.
That one does.
A survey reported in the Journal of Gerontology of 4,000 senior citizens in Durham, North Carolina, that's not far from here, found that people who prayed or meditated coped better with illness and lived longer than those who did not. Also sounds like...
I believe that.
Yeah.
Because their outlook, they have a good outlook. And a positive outlook is generally good for your health.
I'm glad we did the Law of Attraction episode first.
Yeah.
Because a lot of this sounds like what we talked about when we did the Law of Attraction episode. A very positive outlook on the future coupled with an absolute belief that what you think is going to happen is going to happen. If there's anything that's going to kickstart the placebo effect, it seems like that's what's going to do it. It's going to
be that.
It's going to be that. I mean, that's kind of the definition of the placebo effect, that because you believe it's going to be, it is. So shoot, man, I believe. I want to live to 120.
You just gotta believe.
Where things get really interesting is with Candy Gunther Brown. Now, she's an associate professor in the Department of Religious Studies at Indiana University in Bloomington, and she's a Harvard PhD. So this is not, I got my degree in a Cracker Jack box. This person's legit and serious. She led
School of Hard Knocks.
Yeah. She led a study titled Study of the Therapeutic Effects of Proximal Intercessory Prayer, which she calls PIP, on auditory and visual impairments in rural Mozambique, which measured surprising improvements in vision and hearing in economically disadvantaged areas where eyeglasses and hearing aids are not readily available, which goes back to what you're talking about. That, they can't just go to the doctor and get some glasses. The only hope they have is faith healing. So they go and they get this done. And what's interesting about this, Professor Brown used audiometers. And if you've ever been to a hearing doctor, I have, because this ear don't work hardly at all. So I've had these hearing tests done. She used this audiometer to test the hearing thresholds of the people before and after the PIP, as she calls it, the proximal intercessory prayer. And that just means that the person praying for you is close in proximity, like right next to you. There's usually, laying on of hands, the touching was involved.
So they got to be next to you.
Yeah, not smacking them in the head, but just the laying on of hands. So PIP. Now, it was a small sample size. I wish it had been a bigger study, but they had 24 test subjects. For hearing, highly significant improvements for hearing were found post-PIP, with 2 subjects who had their thresholds reduced by 50 decibels. Now, that's a lot. 100 decibels is how loud, if you're standing next to a motorcycle when the motorcycle's running, that's 100 decibels.
Right.
So that's really loud. So half of that, that's a very significant improvement.
Because, even when you turn up a stereo, if you turn it up or move it by 50 decibels, you're going to hear a difference.
Yeah. Of all of the studies, this one hit me the most because she actually went to where these supposed healings were going on, took the measurements before the healing, took the measurements after the healing, and found that some, not all, but some of the people had legit massive improvements in hearing and vision. For vision, significant improvements were found post-PIP in 3 subjects.
So you're telling me that a Harvard student, Harvard
PhD,
found improvements in people that had faith healing done to them.
Hearing and vision, both. Where is it? It's Heidi and Roland Baker, Iris Ministries, and they gather people in Mozambique by playing this film about Jesus, and then an evangelist invites the deaf and the blind up front, promising Jesus will heal them. There were these 2 people who had very significant hearing improvements. There are 3 people whose vision levels went from 2040, which 2400. They can only read the top line of the vision chart. And if you've ever seen that big-ass letter tonight, they could read that, but that's it.
Wow.
Or that's worse. And after the healing, they had 20/80, which meant they could read relatively small print or better. And one subject went from being unable to count the number of fingers in front of him from 1 foot away to having, which is 28,000, that's like terrible, to 125. Which that's not great, but that's the second line from the bottom of the vision chart. That's a hell of a lot better than not being able to count the fingers in front of your face.
Next time you go to the eye doctor, you just got to believe.
You just got to believe.
Or walk out of there with 2 new pairs of glasses.
Now
it's just that simple.
We're going to talk about there was one big study that counters what she found. And we'll talk about that on the skeptic side.
If you can believe you can fly, believe you can see.
That's right. I believe I can see. But the difference between what Professor Brown did and what these other studies do is these other studies attempt to mimic what they think faith healers are doing. Whereas Professor Brown didn't attempt to mimic anything. She actually just went to this group in Mozambique that did this.
Right, just wanted to see it.
And just did the before and after recordings. Now, if you think about it, 24 test subjects, of which 6, that's 25%, had very significant improvements. The others did not. I guess they didn't have enough faith. But it's interesting that should happen that way. And she mimicked also what the study showed, the poll of doctors said. She says that doctors she's spoken with are more open to anything that will bring healing to their patients, so they're less likely to reject the idea of miracles, especially since they deal with life and death circumstances all the time.
That is an amazing aspect of everything that we're talking about today, is how many doctors believe this. Mm-hmm. You would think if anybody is out there debunking faith healing, if anybody's going to debunk it, who's it going to be? It's going to be the doctors.
Yeah.
If so many doctors believe it, and doctors tend to be like other people we've talked about in the show, they tend to be like scientists or engineers, police officers, level-headed people, basically. I mean, how many times do you go to the doctor and you tell them you have a problem, or you tell them that you think or believe something's going on, and they look at you like,
that didn't happen.
Yeah. So for them to, my point being, for them to, for so many of them to believe in this, it makes you wonder. Makes me wonder.
The people who are on the front lines, right?
Yeah.
Seeing it all the time.
Yeah, if anybody's going to shoot it down, it's going to be them.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of them, and it's according to the study, most of them are like, well, no, I believe in faith healing.
More than half said they've seen recoveries they would call miraculous.
That I will say that is incredible, because I was thinking that, when you were gathering the statistics for the show, that most of your doctors would, just laugh it off, think it's a joke. So, I was thinking it would be more like 5%, 10%, not 50 to 74%.
I'm not a believer in this because I am skeptical of all this stuff. But I'm not going to lie. When I started doing the research, I expected to find this complete debunked. No one's
Doctors
ever seen
laughing
anything.
You out of the,
everybody laughing about
man.
it. And you do find some of that, but you also find all these other studies that show, no, there's something going on here. And even Professor Brown, I mean, from what I understand, she is a very avid Christian. But she says, look, you can't prove God did it. We're not proving God did anything. You can't prove that. Right. She says, but all I'm showing you is this is the before, this is the after, and it's significantly different and better.
That is interesting.
And a significant number of people. And that test that she did, the audio-visual test, she said that they repeated in a separate study in Brazil. So it's not like it just happened that one time. Maybe the audiometer was broke, or something. And she made a really good point. She said, look, there's two things you got to think about when it comes to Mozambique. First of all, it's a Muslim country. So you have these people already taking a risk of being ostracized because they're going to this Christian gathering.
To say the least, ostracized. I mean, they can be very strict.
Yeah, very strict.
Very intolerant.
So she says, so that's the first thing. They're already having to go to this under the threat of at least ostracism. So that's one point to keep in mind. Second point, she says, most of these faith healers charge more if they healed you. Right? So people are kind of under pressure to act like they weren't healed so they wouldn't have to pay as much. Right? So you would think that people would very quickly say, my hearing is still crap. And you didn't do anything.
Damn, it didn't work.
And then you go home and you're all happy because you're
like sweet.
But they don't do that. They like legit do show that, they've been healed or whatever. It's crazy. Now, I believe that the placebo effect is a thing, but I don't know, is it? I don't think the placebo effect could be responsible for that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes you wonder how far can the placebo effect really stretch?
Yeah.
And that seems like it would
go
beyond it.
We're not talking about like, okay, the faith healer does this thing, and a week later, suddenly somebody's vision gets better over the coming weeks or months or whatever, which you might call that spontaneous remission or whatever. Coincidence. No, this is like right before they can't hear and right after they can.
That is interesting.
It is and this is, again, PhD, Harvard professor. This is not some, quack Yahoo person, though she is a believer. But that gets back to the sheep-goat effect thing that we've talked about before, that it seems like a person's belief, or at least this is the claim, and that skeptics brush off, that if you actually believe in a thing, it's more likely to occur than if you don't. And that's like a thread that's run through all the shows we've done so far.
I've noticed that. Yeah, it is.
That belief tends to trigger response, which skeptics would say, it's because you think it happened because you want it to happen. It's called confirmation bias.
You want to see some cool shit? Have a wild imagination.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that kind of gets us to the against part. Skeptics are like, this is all baloney.
They're seeing what they want to see.
And they say, look, of course, people who pray, they're going to be healthier, like you said, in terms of heart condition and stuff, because their blood pressure is lower, because they're in a relaxed state. And that doesn't mean God did anything. It's just their body doing its thing when you maintain, your calm, maintain your calm.
Right.
Virtually all scientists and philosophers dismiss faith healing as pseudoscience. The American Cancer Society states that available scientific evidence does not support claims that faith healing can actually cure physical ailments, and that death, disability, and other unwanted outcomes have occurred when faith healing was elected instead of medical care for serious injuries or illnesses.
I've heard of that. I have heard of that. And recently there was somebody who died doing something related to that. And I can't remember the exact details of that, but I do want to talk a little bit about this one particular faith healer. I don't remember his name. He usually wears white, and he's got gray hair.
Oh,
and he's
is
got
it
this
Ben
huge swoop over.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, so they did a report on him, and I don't remember exactly the details of it. I'm sitting here trying to think about it. It's been years since I've seen it, but he supposedly faith healed a bunch of people. And they said, these people that we sent in, it was like a NBC, where they busted him.
Right.
And he got mad. He's like, why would you send people down here that are already okay? Yeah, it was funny.
There was one that I was reading about while doing the research. And this kind of thing is why no skeptic takes any of this stuff seriously.
Right.
So they've got these people in wheelchairs that supposedly have multiple sclerosis. And they get up on the stage, and they do the thing, and they get up and they walk, only to find out that these people walked their asses into the church and were put in the wheelchair when they got there. It's...
God, that and that actually reminds me of a really good movie, Leap of Faith, Steve Martin.
Oh yeah,
man, that was a good movie. Good movie.
Yeah, I saw that in doing the research.
Right, same thing. They're like, okay, on chair, 1C or whatever, such and such has a whatever, and he would act like it's coming to him, and he'd be like, come up here, and you're good now. You're like, hallelujah.
Mm-hmm. So skeptics don't buy any of this stuff. There's a group called...
I can't blame them for that part.
I don't either.
Why would you?
I don't either. But there's some things we're going to get to as we go through this that it's a fair point that people like Professor Brown and another guy make. Now, the group Children's Healthcare is a Legal Duty, they ran a study showing that when parents have practiced faith healing rather than medical care, many children have died that otherwise would have been expected to live. And when people see stuff like that happen, of course, they're going to be up in arms about this sort of thing. The American Cancer Society, again, they did another study that suggested that adult Christian scientists who generally use prayer rather than medical care, they have a higher death rate than other people of the same age.
Yeah, that's pretty
because
scary.
They won't go to the doctor. It's against their faith.
I'll tell you what. You know what? Here's a good middle ground right here. Faith heal all you want. But if you see that person's still dying because, they don't have enough faith, just go ahead and run their ass to the emergency room.
Yeah.
Just, could you do that for me?
And doing this research, I came across a sermon, Joel Osteen.
Joel Osteen.
And apparently I didn't know anything about this guy. He's a big believer.
This guy's awesome.
That God will heal you. Man,
it's the hair, man.
He looks really good for 56.
What?
Like, he's 56 years old.
What the hell?
Yeah. Yeah,
no,
dude,
no,
you must be getting some plastic surgery or something going on.
No damn 56.
He's 56.
56 years old?
Yeah.
Joel Osteen.
Yeah, 56.
He looks like he's our age.
I'm telling you what, dude, he's 50. Unless Wikipedia's
We need more faith.
We need more money. That dude's right. That's what we need. But now he said in this sermon, which he said, 56, that, pray for him. And he believes, according to the sermon, like God will heal you. God wants to heal you. Jesus said, I want to, the whole thing. But go to the doctor.
I could see him saying that.
Like, but go to the doctor. God might work with the medicine, like hedge your bets. Hedge your bets. Go to the doctor. But he's in the U.S.
Yeah.
So if he's telling people Texas, to go, Houston, not to go to the doctor, but just trust Jesus or whatever, he might be liable for some serious
lawsuits. That might be really
lawsuits.
bad for his reputation.
And his bottom line if he got sued.
Yeah, we can think of at least one group that does that.
Yeah, but I'm with you there. I'm like, look, fine. There's a lot of at least circumstantial evidence, if nothing else, that it's the placebo effect kicking in. Great. Believe it. Yeah. Pray for it, but go to the doctor also.
That's a good middle ground.
Yeah.
Have all the faith you want. If it doesn't work, okay, you know what? Let's do something else at this point.
I definitely think doctors should realize, or at least look at the research that shows that the placebo effect is a real thing. We've talked about it before. Right. Pharmaceutical companies have to keep it in mind because it happens so much. And there's one guy I came across, MD, both regular medical doctor and in like homeopathy, like herbal treatment, stuff like that.
Oh, cool.
He goes around teaching doctors how to make the environment of the doctor's office much more, what's the word, like in tune with making people feel better.
You want to put Buddha on this wall here. You must face this with water coming out of it.
But you know why I know that's true? When we lived in Asheville, my family and I lived in Asheville, and we had a doctor there. Asheville's like big into everything natural, herbal, whatever. It's super liberal.
Yeah.
Everybody smokes pot in Asheville. I'm not making this up. It's
hipster city.
It's illegal in North Carolina, but nobody told Asheville because it's all over the place.
That's awesome.
And we would go to the doctor. And it was one of those regular MDs, but also, did some like natural stuff. And office was like the most relaxed feeling. The walls weren't that sterile white color.
Yeah, I hate that. God,
they were
I hate that
warm
shit.
and comfortable. I'm like, man, I could hang out in here all day.
Seriously.
And
got like the spa music playing.
Yeah, literally. That same kind of thing.
That's cool.
And this guy that goes around teaching people to do this, he's like, the reason why you want to do this is because it helps kickstart the placebo effect. It makes people think they're going to get better because they start to feel better even while they're there. And anything.
And then if that doesn't work, you know, bro, just relax, man. Maybe you'll get through
a little bit
this.
of herbal therapy.
Just relax, man.
Right. But it makes sense that anything you could do to kickstart the placebo effect, you should try to do, which is why I think this needs to be studied more. Because all this research, even if it's, quote, just the placebo effect, I like the way Professor Brown put it. She said that the placebo effect is usually used as a label rather than an explanation, because we really have no idea what it is. There's some kind of mind-body interaction that we don't understand. And even if it's, meaning these healings she's saying, he says, even if it's a placebo effect, it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I'll say.
So, hey, if the placebo effect can literally fix someone's vision in the matter of a few minutes, we need to understand how this works.
Yeah, we do.
And put it to work for people rather than just dismissing it because we don't want to believe it. Fine, God didn't do shit. Who cares? If it works, work with it. You know? So that's another thing. Then we've got the issue, skeptics are like, look, illnesses that have psychological or psychosomatic elements, depression and asthma, stuff like that. Because, when an asthmatic gets worked up, it makes it worse. Right? These things far more often are healed by faith healers than any other real disease. Someone breaks a leg.
Yeah.
You bring them to a faith healer, it's not going to do anything.
You can faith heal that. I'm a believer.
Right. And they say if faith healing was a real thing, they could heal these other more real, more physical illnesses just as well as the psychosomatic illnesses. Because why would God be limited to only being able to fix stuff like depression and asthma?
Right.
And that's a fair point.
Though.
That's a fair point.
The asthma thing is interesting, though.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like that goes back to what we talked about, heart disease and blood pressure. Yeah, when asthmatics can remain calm, they're less likely to hyperventilate and have these problems. And I'm not a doctor, so if I'm getting this all wrong, ignore everything I just said.
We're highly trained professionals.
Highly trained professional. I can print facts with the best of them, It just makes sense, though, that those would be the things you would see being healed and not more serious physical ailments. But the guy who was talking about that, his name is, I can't pronounce it. It's like Joss Klinigen. He's the director of the NHS Center for Reviews and Dissemination. He said we need to be paying more attention to the placebo effect and how it works. Right. We're pretty sure that's all this is, but we need to know how can we trigger it.
Yeah.
And that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But then we've got the skeptics refer to as called post hoc ergo propter hoc. What? Because skeptics love to use complicated Latin crap that nobody else can understand. And that means that a genuine improvement or spontaneous remission may have been experienced coincidental with, but independent from, anything the faith healer or patient did.
Wait a minute. Now, what's that called again? Post hoc or what?
Post hoc ergo propter hoc.
Holy crap. What a mouthful.
Yeah, I know. It's just...
Wow.
Which the rest of us normal people who aren't ridiculous like to call coincidence.
Skepticism.
It's basically coincidence. It's like I was saying earlier that, you've got this spontaneous remission, but that was going to happen anyway. And you go to a faith healer because you want to be healed because you don't realize that your remission's about to start. You attribute it to the faith healer, but it would have happened anyway. Yeah. And it only takes one time for it to work for thousands of people to suddenly believe it works, even though the other 999 it didn't work. And that's where skeptics okay, if everybody was healed.
Can't even blame them.
Yeah. And then you get into the faith healers. So, but you have to believe. And to which the skeptic says, cop out, unfalsifiable.
Yep.
Right? You can't prove they didn't have enough faith. The faith healer says, well, of course they didn't, or they'd be healed. Right? And it's very difficult to study this. And Professor Brown talks about that. She's like, all we can provide are these medical reports. Observations. Yep. So we can't really prove anything, but we can show a strong correlation even if we can't show causation. And I respect her for being balanced like that. But there was a huge study, and skeptics love to point at this one. Researchers monitored 1,802 patients at 6 hospitals who received coronary bypass surgery, in which doctors reroute circulation around a clogged vein or artery. The patients were broken up into 3 groups. 2 were prayed for, and the third was not. Half the patients who received the prayers were told that they were being prayed for, and the other half didn't know.
All right.
The researchers found no difference between those patients who were prayed for and those who were not, but a significantly higher number of the patients who knew that they were being prayed for, 59%, suffered complications.
Oh, they got worse.
They got worse, compared with 51% of those who were uncertain. The authors left open the possibility that this was a chance finding, but they said that being aware of the stranger's prayers also may have caused some kind of performance anxiety.
All right, yeah. Don't pray for me.
Yeah. But the believers got something to say about the study, and I got to admit, they're not wrong. So I watched another video, and it is another name that's hard to pronounce. Nabil Qureshi, MD. He was famous because he was raised Muslim and converted to belief in Jesus.
Okay.
And he wrote a book about it, very popular. I believe it was a bestseller, very well known. He was asked about this, and he said, look, if you were going to do an experiment on me, a double-blind experiment with 1,800 people, and how I would react to them in a given situation, I would go out of my way to say, no, you're not going to experiment on me. And his point is, he said, God is a person. So you're setting up this test to test God. And God's like, no, I'm not going to let you test me. And he has got nothing to do with it. So that's the first point he makes, which I got to admit, if you're a believer, that's fair. I mean, when at least from our religious conservative Christian upbringing, I don't remember anywhere in the Bible where someone who wasn't a believer walked up and said, God, prove yourself to me.
Yep.
With all these people, and then I'll believe.
Jesus talked about all that.
Yeah, you have to have faith. Like the faith comes first, right?
Yeah.
So I get it. I get what he's saying there. Second, and this is where I started shaking my head at that study of the 1,800 people. And Professor Brown talked about this too. They got people from these 3 churches that don't believe in faith healing to say the prayers. That's a huge problem. So you're getting people from, it's called the Unity School of Christianity. They were from the Unity School of Christianity. Unity leaders have long denied that prayer works miracles and have called petitionary prayer useless. And these were the guys that were praying.
They didn't want it to work.
So they
We're on to you.
didn't believe to begin with. So you're having people who don't really believe in the power of prayer to heal, saying the prayers. And I mean, come on. I remember from being raised a Christian that you had to have faith. The whole point was you had to have faith, right? And so they didn't have faith.
Pray in faith, ask in faith or whatever, not even doubting at all.
Yeah, that's right.
Not doubting at all.
Yeah. Yeah, we quoted that before. For he who doubts is like the waves of the sea, tossed this way and that, and every wind of teaching.
What is it? He should not expect to receive anything.
Yeah, do not let him expect to receive anything. So, okay,
you just gotta believe.
That totally blew the study out of the water for me. I'm like, oh, come on, really? And this was like distance prayer. People were praying for people from a distance or whatever.
Maybe they had bad reception.
I mean, again, I'm trying to be devil's advocate.
Reception, maybe the radio towers didn't go that far.
Poor spiritual reception.
That's it.
I have to.
You've only got 2 bars. Oh yeah, no, that's not going to work there. Brother so and so. We need at least 4 bars.
Yeah. Now, as I recall, if you're a believer, there was a few times where Jesus healed people just by saying something, and it happened like from a long way away.
He did. God, what was it? It wasn't Cornelius.
No, not Cornelius.
No, someone else. It was
a Roman army officer.
He was like, anything I say, I do, and I have great power, Jesus. If you just say the word or whatever. Yeah. And he's like, go. Yeah. Your daughter?
Yeah, your daughter.
Your daughter's healed.
Was healed. Right.
See ya.
Right.
Hasta la pasta.
Right.
I'm busy.
So that is one example, if you believe in that stuff, of healing from afar, but most of the healings recorded, at least in the Bible, they touched the person, were right next to the person. There was usually some kind of laying on of hands, they call it, involved. And so when Professor Brown is discussing that, she's like, look, we need to study what these people who claim this works are actually doing. We need to go to them. Right. And see what they're doing rather than trying to duplicate what they do. Because seriously, you get a group of skeptic scientists trying to duplicate faith healing sessions. It's just, they're going to do everything wrong because they don't believe, they don't practice this, they don't even know how to set it up. They get the wrong people to pray, they do it in the wrong way, and then they call this study proof that it doesn't work.
Well, and and to further that point, let's say that, let's say it is legit, okay? And let's say this is the Spirit of God or some kind of super intelligent entity. It's going to know if people that are conducting this experiment or test or faith healing are sincere or not.
Right.
It's going to know.
Right.
It's going to be like, no, I'm not going to do it for you. And like I said, I think even Jesus talked about that. I don't remember exactly where, but Jesus would, because he would ask, people would ask to test Jesus or whatever, and he'd be like, no, I'm not going to test you.
Show us a sign. Yeah. I remember that. The only sign that will be shown you is the sign of Jonah. I remember that. Yeah. Yeah, so you couldn't demand.
It was an insult.
Yeah. Even his mom, even Mary, when he does the first miracle with the water and the wine thing. Right. I mean, he's like, Jesus. She said, Jesus, they don't have any wine left. What do I have to do with you, woman? Don't push me around, Mom. So,
does thou question God?
That's a good point. If you're going to study something and say that it proves that what these people believe doesn't actually work, you need to make sure you're actually doing what they're saying is working. And that's why I like Professor Brown, because rather than trying to duplicate what they're doing, she actually just went to them and did the measurements, did the tests to see what happened.
And in the Bible, they would call that somebody who's sincere.
And she, from what I understand, is a big, strong believer Christian. So sheep goat effect. If God is a thing, and keep in mind I'm playing devil's advocate here. If God is a thing, God's probably going to be okay with this PhD from Harvard who believes in him and Jesus and healing and all that showing up. God's like, all right, she's cool. She's cool. But if a bunch of atheist skeptics show up, he's like, I ain't doing nothing for these people. So I get it. I get where they're coming from.
It honestly goes back to that scripture. Since we're talking about all this faith healing stuff.
Well, it's all about faith healing.
He has hidden these things from the wise and intellectual and has revealed them to babes.
I'm glad you said that because she made a great...
Makes you wonder. Yeah. Makes me wonder.
There's a really good point in that. People in the West, and I'm totally devil's advocate because I'm a skeptic. I think if there's anything going on here, it's placebo effect. But I also think if you're going to do a study of something, you have to make it fair. Otherwise, you don't prove anything.
I'd say I'm in the middle. I wonder if some of them are legit.
That would be, if someone could prove
I feel
that,
like some of it could be legit.
let's bottle that stuff and bring it to hospitals.
Snake oil.
But in the West, in Western countries, people don't believe, right?
Right.
So where do you see fewer faith healings, fewer miracles, fewer whatever? Yep. In the West. Now, the skeptics say, well, that's because in the West we're educated, so we don't fall for that baloney. But the believer says, no, because you lack faith, that's why it doesn't work. Which we talk about this.
It's an endless, that's an endless circular argument.
Yeah.
Because the skeptics, like you said, oh, well, that's because we're educated.
Yeah.
The third world countries, no, it's because you don't believe.
You don't believe.
No, it's because you're not educated. No, it's because you don't believe.
And we talk about this all the time.
Which one's real?
It's very much.
Which one is for real?
It depends on your worldview. It's all about your worldview. If you have the worldview of the skeptic, you're going to say, well, it's because they're not educated.
Yeah.
You know? Or they don't have a choice.
Yeah, that's true.
They're very
You can't afford a doctor.
Desperate.
There isn't one in your country.
Yeah.
Hope like hell you can find a faith healer.
Yeah. And so the placebo effect is more likely to kick in, right?
Yep.
Even giving it the benefit of the doubt, the placebo effect's more likely to kick in because
Law
they
of attraction,
already
placebo
believe.
effect, all that.
It all ties together. Yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird.
It does make you wonder which one is for real.
Yeah.
Or are they both for real?
I don't believe it. But I definitely believe that the placebo effect is real because it's been studied so many times. No one can deny it. And I think that we're doing ourselves a disservice as a Western society in not really putting a lot of energy and resources into studying the placebo effect to understand exactly what it takes to kickstart it so that we can do that.
Yeah. More study needs to be done on that.
I don't think God or Jesus is healing people or whatever, but there's something going on. I mean, she took the audiometer measuring before and after, and they could hear better. She took the vision test before and after, they could see better. You know, some of these people had a history. They had a history of these problems, so it's not like, I can't hear anything, and then they walk up and they get healed, and suddenly I can hear. I mean, she's a PhD researcher. So
that's kind of like my mom. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of like my mom saying that she knows people who have had cancer go into remission.
Yeah.
Same thing. Maybe they believed it, and maybe that wishing positivity or positive vibes into your body made you better.
Body's pretty amazing thing. Oh, and Professor Brown, because she's fair, she made this point. This is the last point I want to make. 90% of sick people recover regardless of treatment. There's empirical evidence. If you get some illness at all, 90% of people are going to get better just because the body's amazing and its ability to heal itself. And you're going to attribute that to whatever it is you did to try to get better. To your doctor or the medicine or the faith healer or whatever. I swear sometimes, like if I have a cold or something, I think the medicine is just a placebo. Like they're just selling me some great tasting shit to make me think I'm going to get better because it really doesn't seem to do anything. And then suddenly I'm okay.
Right.
You know? So I don't know.
I want to be a faith healer, John. Especially the one like in that one video where he's got the coat.
Yes.
He's like, whoopsh, whoopsh, whoopsh.
I like the one you sent where the girl like didn't know to fall down. So he had to hit her again.
Acting, damn it.
And she finally got it. She was slow, but she finally got it.
That's where I would totally love to be the second faith healer who just comes across the room with the coat, just whips my coat off. Whoopsh, whoopsh, whoopsh.
You'd be so good at that.
Get a couple of licks in there just to let her know next time. Fall to the ground. Dang it. You feel better, right?
I would totally go
that's what I thought.
to your faith healing sessions just for entertainment.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But what do you think? Do you believe in faith healing? Have you ever been healed or believe you've been healed? Do you totally doubt it or you're a complete skeptic? Do you think it's all baloney? We'd love to know what you think, so be sure to leave a comment below. If you've had an experience with any kind of thing, even something we've already covered, we'd love to talk to you about it, to interview, and to put you on a future show. So definitely email us at the email address above. And as always, thanks for watching.
Perfect.